they're saying, no, we're only going to buy from these sources. But if you ask the question, okay, well, how are you guaranteeing that the fishermen are being paid for their efforts? It's silence.
Welcome to Fish People, a series from the Natural Justice Podcast where we talk to the people in the global fisheries sector. I'm very excited to announce our guest today. Robert Nunes owns a fishing company out of Punta Arenas, Costa Rica. He owns his company together with his wife, and they operate 6 longliners. He is also the vice president of the Longline Association in Punta Arenas. So he will be able to tell us about his experience as a fisher, but also a little bit more about the fishery sector in Costa Rica. Robert, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's go.
Perfect. So to start, I want to give the audience the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a fisher and ended up owning this company.
Yeah, name's Robert Nunes. I came here to Costa Rica. I'm originally from California, United States. Came here 30 years ago. I came here basically, I was working in the United States once I graduated from college, San Diego. I was working at a fish operating plant, filleting fish and doing other things. I came to Costa Rica for the Vuelta Costa Rica, which is a big cycling event here because I was racing for the U.S. team. I kind of just fell into the fish business, and ever since then, been through the part on retail, wholesale, the politics, basically what has really taken over fishing, I think, worldwide. So I've been through the spectrum, see the dynamics of how the business has changed, how fishing has changed on the water and the markets. So gives me a little bit better perspective of what's going on macro. So yeah.
Amazing. And so you started in a fish processing plant. Was this in California also?
Yes, in San Jose, California. I
Okay.
started at a plant there and was filleting, and also drove a truck around trying to pay for university. It was during the summertime,
Mhm.
so I'd load just save money to pay the next semester. And so I got my first experience. I've been a fisherman all my life anyway, but so that
Yeah.
was just kind of an easy fit.
Side gig.
And yeah, side gig,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then seeing the entire supply chain from the fisheries sector. Amazing. Could you maybe paint a little bit of a picture of what the fishing sector in Costa Rica looks like? So what are maybe some of the main species that are targeted? And are we talking about really industrial fishing? Is it more artisanal? I'd be very curious to know.
Yeah, the definition, I think industrial, it just really depends on the definition because a lot of people they hear
Hmm.
industrial and they're thinking really big boats,
Giant.
giant longliners, the Chinese fleets, Ours is an if you an artisanal fleet because they're mostly boats between 40 and 50 feet.
Hmm.
And they're throwing maybe 25 miles of line, 25, 30 maximum of lines. We do have that's 95% of our fleet. We do have about 5% that are bigger boats, going up to 70, 80 feet, but they fish way out. They fish in international waters. And the species are all pelagics. We're fishing tuna, swordfish, mahi, shark, marlin. Before, when I first came to Costa Rica, there was a huge Taiwanese influence. A lot, there was a lot of fish, and that kind of fishery kind of dried up. So we don't have those size boats anymore. All the boats are owned now national by Tico is what we say Costa Ricenses. So there's about 250 boats. The fleet is about 250. Most of them are based in Punta Arenas, and well, almost all of them are based now. So basically, the hub of fishing is in Punta Arenas, where I live.
Yeah. So it's all what you say, what is fishing in the exclusive economic zone of Costa Rica. It's these smaller with 40, 50 feet type boats. That's the large part of your fleet. And they would then be Costa Rican flagged vessels as well. Is it
Yes.
like a very domestic industry with, I guess, maybe more local crew as well?
Yeah, all
Yeah.
domestic, all local. We do
Yeah.
have some people that are here from a lot of Nicaraguan labor,
Mm-hmm.
guys that have come from Nicaragua to work here, a little bit better conditions. But yeah,
Yeah.
all the boats are flagged now. We don't. Yeah, yeah, we don't have any international flag boats. Before we had some coming in from Belize. There were Chinese boats, and they were just coming in under the guise of another flag. But now it's all Tico owned. We have to remember that Costa Rican waters extends almost 500 miles from our coast.
Hmm.
because Coco Islands. It's a huge marine area. We have 30% of our waters protected under the 3030 project.
Marine
That's put
protected areas.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And could you describe with your crew what would a typical day of fishing look like?
Yeah, they come in when we unload. We have here in Costa Rica, we have to wait for Incopesca to send an inspector. They come out, make sure and take down data to go into the database, make sure all the shark fins are. This is from 20 years ago. I think Costa Rica was the first country to implement the strategy of manejo management, yeah, strategy. So they have to make sure they take down all the dates, make sure all the fins are on the shark. Our boats really are focused on tuna, but just to give you a little bit of context.
Hmm.
So we wait, we unload the boats, and then they a couple days later go back and basically our trips are between like 7 and 20 days, depending on how the fishing is. The boats are small, so they're living in maybe a 12-meter area. Four fishermen. Most of there's about four fishermen, and they have all the conveniences. They have the kitchen and the bunks and everything on boards. It's just they'll throw a line maybe at 11 in the afternoon. They'll pick it up maybe 2, 3 in the morning, and just that cycle until they load up,
Hmm.
or until the ice is gone, or the diesel's gone, or there's no more food,
Okay.
and they
Kind
come
of
back
depends on the
in.
resources. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And the catch, of course. Yeah. And you, yeah, because you mostly own longliners. For someone who's maybe less familiar with this type of vessel and method, could you explain a little bit what that entails and what's that usually used for?
Yeah, long line is a technique where it's a big winch. A winch, it holds maybe uh the mega longliners can hold 60, 70, 80 miles of line. We only fish with 20, 25. So basically just entails they'll throw out, it's just one mother line that goes out, and they'll have 600 hooks with a clip, and they just manage the distance between every hook to make sure they don't get tangled, and they'll leave it in the water, and they have buoys that they clip on also to keep the line afloat, and they can manage that depth also with the information they have on thermocline and chlorophyll and a whole bunch of different factors that they decide to calibrate the line, and so they'll leave that in the water 8 to 12 hours, and they'll come back. They have a radio buoy so they can find the line, and that basically just gives them the direction or the position of the line, and they'll go hook it back up to the winch, and they'll go along and just bring that mother line all the way. As the clips are coming in, they're taking the clips off. A lot of them will be empty, and then the ones that they have with the fish on it, they'll pull it off, and they'll fight the fish and pull the fish up, and then it's taken care of as far as gutting and icing, and it goes in. All of my boats, they're smaller boats, so they're 40 to 45. They all work with ice. So we're all fresh fish. We don't work with frozen. We're just all fresh fish. Also, my boat, about 15 years ago, I was one of the first owners to implement green sticking, which is a selective art of fishing tuna. So I brought the sticks from Hawaii, showed the guys how to calibrate the line, what the technique. It's basically a trolling technique,
Okay.
and so with a plastic squid. And the tuna, basically what it does is it's just trolling 8 little plastic squids, and they're barely touching the water, and the tuna just love that. And so when there's schools of tuna, we can fish a lot faster and load up, and there's zero bycatch. So we have the two arts on board.
Yeah. And that was
Green stick.
green sticking.
Yeah, green
Okay.
sticking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically,
Interesting. Never heard of
yeah,
it.
it's a really interesting, and we're trying to get MSC certified for the green stick float fleet, and if that happens, maybe it'll give us a little bit more advantage in the market.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Actually, that is a good segue to something I wanted to ask you as well, which is something that has probably not escaped you that in the last years and increasingly ever more so, we have become aware of the fact that not all species are in good health. There are environmental as well as social challenges sometimes with the fishing industry. So there is a lot of pressure also from retailers to have certain guarantees and demonstrate that the fish is sustainably caught. and that there were no labor violations, etc. I was wondering, do you feel like, are there maybe any challenges here on the start of the supply chain, which I feel isn't always highlighted for fishers in doing all of that extra work? And, do you actually see a return on investment for that? And what's really your perspective on that transition that we've had in the last decades or so on sustainability and really the guarantees at point of sale that are requested?
Yeah, it's a double blade sword. I think a lot of people try to understand the complexity of some of the management strategies. There's a lot of I've been involved in actively in the FIP development here in Costa Rica, the Fisherman Improvement Project, and it's when we were I wouldn't say sold, but when it was kind of brought into brought into the light, this new
Yeah.
the mentality of FIP.
Yeah.
It was presented. Say, okay, it was presented to us as it's a win-win for everyone. It's a win for the resource, a win for the fishermen, and a win for the market. And so, I was really enthusiastic in the beginning. We went to seminars with Sandra Draka, who was one of our friends from an NGO here operating in Costa Rica. And we went down to Peru and Chile, Ecuador, different forums. The message was the same as far as, okay, well, we want to get everybody on board. We signed up for FIP, and now we're posted in Fisheries Progress. So anybody can go and follow us on Fisheries Progress, see how our FIP is doing. And like you said, the social component they just added, so there's a whole nother
Layer.
layer of
Yeah.
that I have to bring in, and it's not easy sometimes. Costa Rica doesn't have any labor problem. Mostly, I think they brought that on because there was a lot of Asiatic fleets that are, they have problems with, these kids working on these boats, and sometimes they're not in port for 6 or a year. So, but Costa Rica has a really robust
Yeah.
system of treating those kinds of issues. So that wasn't a big problem. But the FIP, one of the biggest problems with the fisherman improvement is there's, of course, we're coming out of a generation of people that just went out and fished. So
Yeah. No
all of a
problem.
sudden, yeah, all right, let's go, just whatever, pay your license every year. Now we come and they have to, of course, there's set. They have set books, their lances, their sets, and so they have to fill that out. And then they have a temperature. They have to fill that that paper out, and they have an operation book where they have to fill that out. So there's three different in Costa Rica. There's three different uh, books that they have to fill out when they come in, and that gets given to the inspector, and the inspector takes that so they can file that into the archives of Incopesca. The only thing is, and I've been an advocate of this for years, and I've never gotten an answer yet. Is what mechanism? And I think I spoke a little bit about this in Boston. There's no mechanism in the FIPS or any of these, or a lot of these projects that are bringing or guaranteeing that the fishermen are actors in the advantage,
Hmm.
because a lot of people, a lot of businesses or companies will say, "Yeah, we're really on board." Every time we go, there's Walmart, there's Cisco, the big ones that move
Hmm.
large ones. They're saying, "No, we're only going to buy from these sources." But if you ask the question, okay, well, how are you guaranteeing that the fishermen are being paid for their things they're
Efforts
putting
and
in, their
yeah.
efforts? And it's silence. So because normally, and the problem is in all of Latin America, and I think most in the world, is we receive a price. We don't give a price. I don't say, "Hey, my fish is worth this much today." No, they come
Hmm.
and say, "Hey, when you get to the dock, they say, no, your fish is this is
That
what
would
your
be
fish is
nice.
worth." Yeah. So you don't have any way to incorporate the costs, the extra costs that we have VMSs. We're gonna have electronic monitoring. There's all new paperwork we have to pay for. There's various things that have lumped on to our operating costs, but I have no way of covering those costs. So what happens is the margin, unless it's moved on this side for the commercial side, the market side, and they come back and say, "No, we're willing to pay X amount more to offset these costs that the fishermen have." The problem is there's so many middlemen that how do you guarantee that if I don't know some Whole Foods or some company in the states paid extra for that fish because of the efforts? How do you guarantee that the fishermen got paid that? Because there's so many middlemen in the way. Someone could have said, "Hey, okay, they're paying me more, but I'm not going to pay the fishermen anymore." So That is
Yeah.
one of the mechanism. There has to be a mechanism where the fisherman is, and that's why I say it's a double-edged sword. Because if that profit margin starts getting down to a point where it's not profitable anymore to fish, then I think the whole chain, the whole domino effect up the line is just going to fall. And
Yeah.
I think that's something we have to be thinking about.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that because I find in my experience in the past 10 years in the fishery sector and, always having worked more on the side of making the sector more responsible, I find it is often not highlighted enough. I was very surprised learning that, getting some of these, participating in a FIP, for instance, or getting certification or whatever market mechanism it is, that it doesn't necessarily guarantee you get a higher price or any type of premium price for your product, and that there just isn't kind of that return on investment on efforts, where I have seen a lot of willingness from the production level, like in speaking with fishermen, but also hear sometimes that there's barely any profit to take home sometimes if you keep increasing the cost, but the price kind of stays the same. Plus, then you have the issue of fluctuation in prices with the different species. So I do think that's something we need to talk a lot more about. And at the end of the day, the fishery sector is a for profit business, and people do need to make ends meet. So I really appreciate you highlighting some of the challenges and kind of the history there. Switching more from the commercial perspective, I would be interested in understanding the governmental involvement in, in these FIPs, for instance. How involved is the government? Has there been a lot of changes? I, of course, also don't know what the sector looked like 20 years ago. It seems like, from what you describe, at least the activity in the EEZ now is a lot less risky than what we see for some fisheries. So, yeah, I'd just be curious to know kind of how has the government supported this transition in the last 10, 20 years with more of a focus on responsible fisheries management.
Yeah, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was just like kind of open market, right? You went out and fish, and there was basically no regulation. But I think the market really, at least the market is defining what they want, and that's the good part. Maybe they're not. Hopefully, what the hope is that eventually the market will come back and recognize, the fishermen. There's a huge effort on the side of the fishermen to be more sustainable, and the people have to understand the fishermen are the first affected, so they're the ones that have the most money in the game. So if there's no resource, the first ones to go down is us. So it benefits us to be, and it wasn't easy. Still isn't easy. I mean, you're talking about a generation, a mentality. You need to change. We still have, problems within our own sector. People that don't understand maybe a vision more towards the future. Thinking about
Yeah,
now. I need to,
of course.
pay for my house and pay for my now. But
Which is not unique to fisheries. We'll
yeah,
see that with.
exactly. So, and I think everybody has that. And so it's hard for them to sometimes understand that a lot of the actions we're going to see in 5 or 10 years. So here in Costa Rica, and I don't know if it's just us, but it's always sold as the ecotourism. So everything's eco, everything's green, everything. So if you talk about
Notice that.
production, yeah, you talk about production, people get a little, there's a lot of, and sorry for there's a lot of radical NGOs that work in Costa Rica,
Hmm.
and their only solution is prohibition. And prohibition
Yeah.
is the worst thing you could do. I mean,
Yeah.
everything can be managed. Everything can be managed. And if you're not managing it, if it's prohibition, then you're losing data. Then you don't even have the data to back and try to find out what's happening with the species, migration and the catch rates and size limits. There's a whole bunch of data that you lose by prohibition. So and the political part of it, the government is real, at least now. Our FIP is country. It's país. FIP that's being the motor is the country. The government is really involved. It's not a private sector. It is part of it's private, part of it's the government's in the fishing sector, and the government is really involved because they have to show to the world that they're doing their job. So we really lean on the government to help us out as far as to make them understand what are the dynamics of fishing and how we can manage them better. And they're on board. The problem is, though, is like every 4 years here in Costa Rica, there's no continuum. So our last administration almost eliminated us. I mean, it was the worst administration in my 30 years here. They were really radical conservationists, and they wanted to eliminate all types of fishing areas. It was just with no scientific base. It was just they were being led by some of these radicals, and just, yeah, we're going to close this area for no reason. They didn't
Hmm.
have to say it's because of this and this and this. The fishing sector would come back and say, hey, it's better if you're going to close something, close this area because of our captures. We've seen, okay, this and this over the years. So why don't we work together? They didn't care. The president at that time was just looking to put a medal on his chest before he left. This administration is a lot more friendly. He has open eyes. He's willing to listen to the productive sectors of his country and understand, that these are, their jobs, their people that are trying to survive, and for the well being of the country. As protein sources are getting harder and harder to find, worldwide, you have to have some kind of production in your country. You can't just rely on imports. You have to have some kind of export or something to feed your people. So
I find it very problematic, the demonization of the fishery sector that we see now, and I've brought this up before, one thing that really bothers me about it is that it's so extremely privileged. There's so many people that depend on the fishery sector for their livelihoods and as a healthy source of food. Um, yeah, I wonder with the government, it kind of, if there's maybe a pressure, Costa Rica has, of course, this reputation to uphold as, the country without an army. And that's like ecotourism. And, it's all about eco this, eco that there. And then maybe we know that the fishery sector can be sustainable. We know that it can coexist with that image. We know that it can be one of the most sustainable sources of protein, depending on kind of on the species and how it's caught. But it seems like there's still just a lot of misinformation still. And that's very, yeah, that really is a pity. And I hope that is something that we're going to focus a lot more on than demonizing a sector that is going to exist, that should exist, and that has a right to exist. How do you see that there is a role for fishers in taking this initiative with the responsible transition, I guess, where maybe there are still challenges with fisheries? Where do you see, like, okay, that's, if I talk to my fellow fishermen, that this is something really I recommend them to take it upon themselves to support this transition and make sure that we do have this sector still in 10, 20, 30 years?
yeah, a lot of it, a lot of the changes that have gone is to kind of politically structure the fishing first. So you have representation, a legal representation where you actually have paper, not just a whole bunch of people kind of getting together. No, a structure where you have in here Costa Rica it's called cédula jurídica, which is
Mhm.
basically you're recognized as an organization, and so that gives you a lot of political power. Like I had mentioned before, fishing has gotten everything's political. I mean, there's everything's moved through political means. You have to have a lot of representation in the Asamblea, which is here in Costa Rica, because a lot of the laws and the projects that come through, they have to be passed through Congress, right? They have to be passed through the Assembly here in Costa Rica. So you need to be working on all fronts, not just in the water. You need to have a
Mhm.
political representation in the Assembly. You need to have, certain people that are working in markets, because it's all intertwined. Because if I bring in 5 tons of fish and it's not worth anything, then then what you're doing is it's no use to the resource, because you're pulling out 5 tons of fish from the water, and then you're selling
Mhm.
it for nothing, and then all of a sudden the guys aren't making any money. So as far as that's the first part, is to get structured. We had to get structured in what they call cámaras here. So there's different cámara longline associations. There's one in the south, there's one in Punta Arenas, and one in north in Guayaquil. And so we got all together, and we've formed a federation, and that gives us a little bit more political arm with just being recognized,
Yeah.
and that we're serious people. There's people that are,
Hmm.
they're analytical. They can analyze stuff and be able to explain the dynamics of fishing today, and how, how important we are as a productive sector. And I think that's the first step. The next is, and you, like you said, it's tough to change the mentality of how many someone does something for 20 years, right? But when you see results, and that's when we get back to, the markets, we're hoping that the markets will recognize and change. If they see results and see that maybe fishing prices go up, or someone's coming back to finance some of the actions of the FIP, something to make them more productive, or something that would help them out financially. And that's what fishing, I mean, it's kind of a simple simple way to describe it, but fishermen are looking for something that'll either make them more money or make them more productive. And
Hmm.
so anything out of that realm, it's tough. You have to look for the framework to tell them this actually is going to make you, this action of conservation is going to make you more productive
Yeah.
in long run. This area, if we can manage this area, it's going to make it more productive. There'll be overflow effect in this certain area. And those are hard concepts for fishermen to understand, because it's not tangible. And that's what they, like we tell you, they want to see something, but I haven't seen anything. We had, just to give you an example, 10 years ago, we started a project called the Decreto Atún, which is the tuna decree. And that was a long line, got together with the sports association here in Costa, the sports fishermen. And we pushed a project so we could lower the pressure of the international seiners here in Costa Rica. Because
Hmm.
Costa Rica doesn't have a seiner fleet, a tuna seiner fleet. They sell licenses to internationals to come into Costa Rican waters. And they could fish up to 12 miles from the coast. And that was just killing us because, longliners can't fish in areas where seiners are working. They just can take a whole school. Tuna fishing had been going down and down and down, and it was hard to. There was a lot of things like we said, okay, we'll put VMSs on. So all the fleet in Costa Rica, 100% longliners have VMSs. There was some other, they had to mark all the equipment. There were some other things that we negotiated. Uh, but the other side was they had to push the longliners out. So we got them out to 80 miles, and some other pelagic areas that are closed. And this year and last year it took a while, but this year and last year have been phenomenal. Never seen the quantity of tuna and size that we've seen last year and this year. So it took, the people had to have patience, but that's what we need to see. That's what the
Paid
fishermen
off.
say, man, it's paying off. And so there's
Yeah.
things that I negotiated that kind of hurt me on one side. I'm making up for it because I'm fishing a lot more. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's kind of there's an ecosystem of different actors that are involved, and fishermen are very much part of that. Also, I like how you explain, yeah, you have to kind of, they care about those two things, and they can be maybe have a lot to do with what you're proposing, but then you do need to kind of meet them where they're at and phrase it in that way. And I think that's something that's often missing. It's kind of that, like, think like a business, because you're talking to a business. So of course that's what they
Exactly.
care about.
That's what they
You know,
care
you
about. Yeah.
can't expect people to volunteer all the time, and that's not just a fisherman thing. That's something you'll see in the entire supply chain. So something I want to talk to you about specifically is electronic monitoring, because I know that in collaboration with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, you have been involved in, I believe it is a piloting project for electronic monitoring our vessel. Could you tell us a little bit about this project?
Yeah, we have two projects going on right now
Hmm.
on two of our boats, and we're running it with the SFP is basically the commercial side, looking for people that are interested in financing this technology, people interested in buying a fish from this type of technology if there's going to be any reaction to the market. And
Hmm.
the Nature's Conservancy is actually who is on the other side. They're involved with some other companies in developing the technology in sea, like in the logistics of putting stuff on the boat, teaching the captains, how to use the technology, and those logistics. But yeah, the first boat we have on is basically they're fine line. They're trying to. It's been on for maybe a year, maybe more, and it's basically in the initial stages where they were testing the technology, making sure they have an iPad. So they have an iPad. So they're trying to get rid of this. All the captain there writing down on
Mm-hmm.
just a lot more streamlined into Inco Pesca. You just send it and they'll have all that information instead of having to write everything down. And also on species identification when they come on board. So the camera takes a picture or it takes, and with AI, they're developing an AI software that can identify the fish, take size, everything of the fish can be taken there. And then calculate, it has in the program it goes size, how many, and that's basically they're doing that to work with Incopesca for data related reasons. So it makes it a little bit easier. See what the fishermen are doing, see if they're doing what they should be doing, and then all that information gets just kind of uplinked into Incopesca. The other boat, it's a purely commercial adventure. So with Nature's Conservancy, Alberto Terran, we've been working with developing a system where it's an RDF tag. The tag goes on the tuna or whatever fish you have. Right now, we're working with tuna. So the camera is on board. Once the fish comes out of the water, it scans. There's a scanner on the roof, on the upside of the roof, and it scans that RDF tag and it gives the position where that fish was caught, what vessel, all the vessel's name can be inscribed into the software, the vessel's name, its license, this, when it left, how many days it has. That fish goes into the hold, and there's sensors, temperature sensors in the hold, and it will keep that track of the temperature during trip. When it comes out, when we unload the fish, then it gets scanned again, and that tag can go all the way to the final buyer. And so it's a traceability issue. What they're looking for is to better the traceability of the fish. So if
Yeah.
you're a company in the States and you want to know exactly where that fish was caught, what vessel caught that fish, what temperature it was at during trip, that's all going to be on that little tag. So
Yeah.
we're trying to develop that technology right now.
Yeah, so you have a lot more of the data. I guess it's also quite good for the quality of the data that you have, and then it gets put in that system, and that will really ultimately help the traceability through the supply chain. So I wanted to ask you about the main benefits of this, but maybe we have already covered it. Is there anything else that you'd like to add where you're like, oh, that's actually also another thing, at least from our perspective, that would be a benefit?
I think it just alleviates a little bit of the captains. They have to be constantly on the books and putting data
Yeah.
down in the book that can get wet.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things that can happen to the books, and I think it's a more fluid process, I think. And it
Mhm.
also, our boats are really small. So you have four people, there's five bunks, but usually the bunk, they have a bunch of stuff thrown into that bunk. So there's four bunks, captain, three crew members. So if you have to put an actual human on board as an
Yeah.
observer, it's tough. It's going to be tough. So if we can get the electronic monitoring all figured out and approved by Incopesca and by basically all the institutions that are involved, I think it'd be a lot better. Because having an extra person on board will incur extra costs for us and food and everything else. And really, like I said before, we don't have a way to incorporate those costs, and so that's just coming off the top of our profit margin.
Yeah.
And it's tough now, and so I don't. I think that's one of the challenges that we're going to have to that's financing is always one of the biggest challenges and I think in all these projects.
Yeah. Because was having observers on board something that would maybe be a requirement in the future?
Yes, we
And this
as
could be an
we're
alternative.
exactly.
Yeah.
We are now we're cooperates in the Tropical Tuna Commission. And
Hmm.
so Costa Rica has to have a certain percentage of boats with observers on board. But right now, they're just boats over, I think they're 23 meters. So we have
Hmm.
very few boats that are 23. So it's easy to cover that now. But
Yeah.
eventually, they're going to say, hey, it needs to bump that up to 30%.
Everything.
So it's gonna so it'd be tough for the smaller boats to associate to
Manage that.
take that cut. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Space wise, it's interesting. Sometimes it's these very simple to understand limitations. Like there's just not enough space. Plus, observer can be risky profession. Sometimes, there may be better to have them in a separate bunk. But if you have a small boat, it's just not feasible. You talked a little bit about the transparency. So could you expand on that a little bit and how you think that something like electronic monitoring can help build that trust if you go a bit down the supply chain?
Like we talked before, a lot of the NGOs, there are a lot of good NGOs in Costa Rica. I don't want to, I don't want to pull them into the same sack, but there's a lot of NGOs that are just they're always looking for some new project, and so they don't trust Incopesca.
Hmm.
We give data to Incopesca, they interpretate it, they have it all. It's public, anybody can go in there, and so
Okay.
they don't trust. Maybe for that side, you can kind of calm a little bit of this constant attacks. Electronic monitoring, the camera doesn't lie. So you're gonna get truth on there. You're gonna get the truth and see what the fishermen are actually doing. And but right now, fishermen are conscious. Uh, th- there's people. A lot of people talk about, because in Costa Rica it's legal still, and we have licenses to fish shark. And so
Hmm.
when I say, I tell somebody when I go, you know, visiting somebody in the States or Europe or wherever, if I have a chance, they say, "You guys still?" I thought it was illegal. No, it's not illegal. It's illegal to fin sharks, and that hasn't happened in Costa Rica for 15, 20 years. It's just, and so, but the narrative sells. So it's always in the news. They're always trying to, and the videos that they show from 20 years ago. So it's like, and so that I think that'll calm a little bit of that. And the other part for us will be a big one is traceability. Right now, a big thing for us to be able to ship into the United States, the NOAA, there's an it has to have the fish has to have traceability. And now what the exporter has to do is about a whole bunch of paperwork, and he's got to send that by
Hmm.
scanning or whatever. And if you just had a system that you could just upload into the NOAA and just get all that information. Here's the fish was caught here, it went here, and then it went here, and now it's here. Then it's just going to make life a lot easier.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that will be, but like I said before, it all will come down to costs and financing and see, because the technology isn't cheap. So yeah.
No, and certainly I believe electronic monitoring is still quite earlier stages where I haven't really seen it. I think maybe in Australia or New Zealand the
Hmm.
requirements are already there, but otherwise we're really in a piloting phase for most countries. And yeah, it sounds like efficiency is a big thing. And efficiency is
Hmm.
a big thing for
Yeah,
business.
yeah, yeah.
Time is money. So, in addition to building that trust in a way that's maybe also more sustainable if we think about all the additional requirements that we might even going to have in 5 years' time. So, if you look at the future, what would you like the Costa Rican sector to look like in 10 years' time? And what are some changes that you would hope to see?
I'm hoping that we stay in the lines of the FIP that we're developing. I don't know, since there's three and the MSC certification, there's three big pillars that, and one of them will be hard is population. There's one of them is you have to prove that the population of the resource is in good state, right? So that's a hard one because we're working with the SIAT and Mahi Mahi. Tuna is a pretty easy one because they have data
Hmm.
from tuna boats. They manage the tuna populations in the Eastern Pacific through the tropical tuna stream. So that might be an easier one. But I'm hoping that we stay on the same course, and eventually, one of the big problems I think in Latin America, I don't know in the States, but here is a generation gap. Everybody worries about there's not going to be any resource around. It's going to be fished out. The ocean is really, really resilient, super resilient. And I'm not saying that you can go out there and just fish everything. I'm saying if you have management, and it's really easy to manage from such a small fleet to manage the resource from this end. The problem is that there's a generational gap, and and people aren't talking about it. And it's kind of in the shadows because most in Costa Rica at least. And I was talking to a gentleman from Belize. They're having the same problem. Is there's no kids that are coming up to be captains.
Yeah.
There's nobody. And I tell you, my captains are 60s. Once they retire, there's no one. And that's a huge problem, not just for us. That's a huge problem for the world. because that's a huge fishery that will go away, that sends tons and tons of fish into the United States. And these people, all my kids, one of my kids, they all graduated from college and they went off and did other things. So, and most of the kids that are in the business, they're not fishing. They're managing the fish. Their dad retired, and so they're managing the boats, but
Hmm.
no one's on board. I think
Yeah.
I could 10 guys I know that their sons are actually on the boat. But out
Hmm.
of 250 boats, there's no, that's in 10 years, there's going to be I hope not, there's going to be a crisis. We've gone to ENA, which is our national, it's like a trade school here in Costa Rica. If you look at their curriculum, they have sport fishing. So they wanted all these kids to get into sport fishing, down in these marinas and stuff, and go off and troll and sport fish. But there's nothing for commercial fishing.
Wow, it's not even available.
It's not even available. So no one's pushing. No one's trying to push for the new generation to go commercial fish. Not even in the governmental institutions. So I think that's a big challenge that we're going to have to face, and not just like I said, not just here. I think a lot of people. I don't know if I would want my kid out on a boat.
Hmm.
It's a tough life. It is a tough
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
and
So
and these
risk has a lot
guys.
of risks.
Yeah, and then the generation of these kids that are coming up they're not as they're not as
Tough.
tough as the guys that were back in, that were born in
Yeah.
the 60s, so or 70s. So
Yeah.
it's a tough sell.
No, on the plus side, as I understand it, a lot of our jobs are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, except for manual labor that cannot be done by machines. So maybe that's going to help push some people
Yeah.
into fishing, because it's pretty much guaranteed job security from what I hear now, not just in Costa Rica, but in many other countries that are, now they're still okay. But at some point, there's not going to be enough people from the right age to
Yeah,
do this work.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. I think I think it may be worldwide.
Hmm.
It's going to put in a lot of people thinking about, where our food's coming from, where's it going to come from in the future. I hope not, but I'm just doing numbers. I don't, at least in Punta Arenas, it's a small place in the world, but at least our fleet, I can tell you about our fleet. And our fleet, there's going to be a gap there. We've been looking to see how we can solve that problem.
Yeah, yeah. That's going to be a problem, and good that you mention it, since it will affect so many sectors around the world. Yeah, fishing is human work, and it's always gonna be. You can't really imagine that we can get many more efficiencies compared to where it is now. That's definitely going to be a challenge. So I would like to thank you for sharing your perspectives today. It's really great to have your perspective as a fisher, as someone who owns a fishing company, as well as the opportunity to learn a bit more about the sector in Costa Rica that I did not know much about yet, but I feel a lot more wise about it now. So thanks for that. And if anyone that is listening would like to follow more the work that you are doing with together with SFP and the Nature Conservancy on electronic monitoring and the potential there, I know that they do publish reports on that. So keep an eye out for their websites to follow that more closely. I know I definitely will, because I find electronic monitoring very interesting, and the potential that it has there. So yeah, thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you for having us and having this perspective. I think it's really important that the people understand how the fishermen, what they're dealing with, and and how they think, and basically
Yeah.
towards the future, where we're going.
Yeah, I agree. I feel secretly we all agree. We just don't always use the same language to express
Exactly.
that.